Hello everyone and welcome to tonight's presentation of OTF Connects, Safe Social Media with Shanna Burns and Ryan Brawl, who are here on behalf of our program today. And we're very excited to have Shanna and Ryan back again. They have presented before on a lot of things related to digital literacy and being safe online. And that's certainly a growing concern and for all of our very digitally connected young people. And so we're very happy to have them here, and of course we're happy to have all of you here tonight. We've got teachers from quite a widespread across the province, which we always love to see, and we are very grateful that you gave up some of your time this evening. And on behalf of Syria Skirhan, who's the administrator and facilitator of the OTF Connects program, she extends a huge thank you to you for the extra learning that you're doing for your students' benefit. So at this moment, though, I'm going to hand things over to Shanna and Ryan, who'll be able to introduce themselves a little bit better than I have, and we'll go ahead and get going. If you have any tech issues, just let me know in the chat, and I'll see what I can do. So over to you, Shanna and Ryan.
Thanks, Louise. So I'm Shanna Burns, and I am the Center Manager for the CAMH Center for Prevention Science, which is part of the Center for Addiction and Mental Health Hospital in Toronto, but we're located in London, Ontario. And I'll let my colleague Ryan do a brief introduction for himself.
Hi everyone, thanks for joining us this evening. My name is Ryan Brawl. I am an assistant professor in the Department of Sociology and Legal Studies at St. Jerome's University in the University of Waterloo. I'm a PhD in sociology, and most of my work lately is focused on youth technology use and cyberbullying and how adults can prevent and respond to help youth who find themselves in difficult situations with media and especially social media.
Great. Thanks, Ryan. So today we'll just quickly tell you that this presentation will discuss strategies for helping youth safely use social media, and specifically we're going to focus on the mixed messages that youth receive, violence and bullying, changing social norms, and identity development and friendships. So just to start, I'd like to start off with a little quote, and it says, "We must learn to balance the material wonders of technology with the human wonders of life." While technology is new to us as adults in some ways, it isn't so much to the kids that we teach. So as the caption says, we're now teaching Generation M. Balance is key today, and we hope to provide you with just that, a balance of the positive and negative around technology use, plus a balance of ways to encourage you to disconnect while also encouraging us as educators to connect. So if we think about it, the amount of time that young people have spent with media has grown to where it's even more than a full-time work week. And when anyone's spending this much time, we want to make sure we understand how it's affecting them, both good and bad. And this quote has been circulating in lots of presentations for a long time now, because I think that's the most important thing. The importance of media and understanding, what the impacts are on our youth for good and for bad. So what's so different? Because the reality is that we experienced our coming of age years in a world, with music, with technology, but just with far less technology than this generation. At my house there was one phone in the kitchen. We'd have to take turns using it. We'd have to have conversations in front of our parents. And we got the internet late into my high school years. It was dial-up. It was really slow. If someone lifted the phone, you lost your signal. It was just very different than obviously the accessibility that kids have nowadays. If I needed to know where my friends were, I could look down the street and knew instantly whose house they were at. So with kids today, they're same struggles with coming of age the way we did in our teenage years, making good decisions, bad decisions, gained friends, lost friends, tried out different clothing styles, hair. The biggest difference is that they're doing it in a world of communication and technology differently than we are. The things that they're doing are posted online. They're for everyone to see, and for good and for bad. Those mistakes are often remembered online, as well as the good times are remembered online. Today's youth are coming of age. They're struggling for autonomy and identity, as we all did, but just doing it with the friendship, play, and self-expression that we find online. So if they want to find their friends, they might be using their cell phone, Instagram, Facebooks, Twitter, And the biggest difference is that just that they have so much more media and technology. So if we look at the research from the MacArthur Foundation, the Digital Youth Project, Living and Learning with New Media, these are some of the mainstream practices that youth are facing and doing online. So really, their friendship-driven practices and interest-driven practices happen online, where youth are navigating friendships and romance, authority, and learning from their peers through social media and media in general. They're essentially hanging out online to develop a sense of identity. Youth will say they love hanging out in person too, but they're doing it both ways. They're doing a lot online as well as in person. They have always-on communication. They're continually updating and uploading while rarely disconnecting. You can often see, youth on their phone texting at the same time they're having a conversation with somebody else because they're just always in constant communication. Flirting and dating is a normal practice both online and off for most youth. And most youth admit to feeling more confident when they communicate via technology than in person. Research does show that media impacts the bonding experience for youth because they look to media to feel validated and get ideas about the identity they want to have. And social media is a great place to test out new identities and see how much attention or praise we can receive. I'll pass it over to Ryan now.
Thanks, Janice. So we just want to provide a little bit further of a background, I guess, on some of the ways in which you use technology. Some of this you probably know, some of it might be a little bit new, but just to set the foundation for what we'll be talking about moving forward. So on this slide you can see just a little bit of information about some trends related to youth technology use. And this comes from a Canadian data, actually. It's nice we don't have a lot of Canadian data on these topics, but this comes from a MediaSmarts survey fairly recently of about 5,500 Canadian students from grade 4 to 11. So on average, these students use media for about 9 hours a day, which is obviously quite a bit, and that includes everything from internet use to listening to music to playing video games to watching TV. And one of the things that I'll talk about a bit more in a moment is that the connection, of course, is becoming increasingly portable. So whereas, when I was a kid, everybody, if you had a computer, it was in probably the living room or something like that, a very visible area of the house, and we used to just say, put the computer in a visible area of the house and keep an eye on what your kids are doing, and that'll be okay. But now it's so much more difficult to monitor as adults or as teachers. I mean, with smartphones, I'm sure you've seen students on their phones in your classes, depending on what age group you teach. I know certainly teaching in university, I see that a lot, and just the number of students that have their own computers and laptops in class. Technology is so much more portable now than it was even just a few years ago, and now with watches and smartwatches and things like that and Google Glasses, we're seeing it become even more portable. By grade 11, almost everybody has a cell phone. So it begins much earlier than that, of course, but it's pretty much ubiquitous by grade 11. And this was an interesting question. The survey asked, can I be hurt if I talk to strangers online? In grade 8, 80% of students said yes, but only 63% of grade 11 students said yes. So I think most of us teachers and parents do a pretty good job at teaching kids, to avoid talking to strangers online, but something seems to happen there as they get older, whether it's, we stop making these comments, or they just become a little bit more complacent or comfortable online. I don't know what exactly it is, but something's happening there, and it's just worth keeping in mind that maybe some of the messages we do give to younger kids are applicable as well to an older age group. So what this slide shows is the percentage of U.S. teens using social media platforms from early 2014. So as you can see here, Facebook continues to dominate. And these are some of the more popular social media platforms, but 84% of American teens have a Facebook account. Google Plus is about second, although it might be a little bit misleading because Google forced some people to sign up there for Google Plus without them necessarily wanting to if they had Gmail or other platforms. But as you can see, social media is very popular among American teens and Canadian teens, and most teens, of course, have more than one social networking account. Twitter is more popular among adults than among teenagers, but it's still quite popular at 40% of teens, and then we can trickle down to things like Instagram, and Snapchat, and Tumblr, and Foursquare, and the like. But I'm going to guess that you probably already knew that teens like to use social media. I don't think that's likely to be new information to anybody who is on this particular webinar. What is new and what is changing at a rapid pace, as I mentioned a moment ago, is the way in which social media is used and consumed. And in particular, I'm talking about mobile use, so smartphone use, tablet use, things like that. And this has increased quite substantially in the last couple of years. So again, what this chart shows is American data from about a year ago, and we can see in this chart that social media, and especially the social media platforms that are used primarily by teens, are generally accessed on mobile devices. So the yellow or gold color in this chart indicates the percent of users accessing these sites on mobile devices, and the blue bar indicates the percent accessing these social media sites on traditional computers. So as you can see, only LinkedIn, which is far more popular among adults than youth, and Tumblr, which is a picture storage and sharing platform, are mainly used with, or mainly accessed through computers. So mobile use of social media is now certainly the norm. So the reason we bring this up is that when we talk about social media safety, we can't divorce social media use from cell phone use. As I said, we used to be able to say, just put a computer in a common area of the house and things will be okay. Or we used to say, monitor what students are doing on computers in your classroom. Maybe you had one or none in your classroom, but those messages, they're still important, but they're outdated and they're overly simplistic. So hopefully tonight we'll be able to provide you with some other suggestions or strategies to help teens or young people in general navigate some issues that might come up with social media. One of the key things that we want to stress, and Shanna's mentioned it already as well, is that it's not all bad. We tend to hear about the bad things that happen over social media. We tend to hear about the gossiping, the rumors, the bullying. But like anything else, this is not the norm. Most people who use social media aren't bullied. Most people who use social media don't gossip constantly. And like anything else, most youth use these services very appropriately. In an interesting survey, and this might be surprising to some people, 12 to 17-year-olds said that their favorite way to communicate with their friends is in person, not online, not through social media, and not through texting. And why is that? Well, 38% said that it's more fun to hang out with one another in person, and 29% said you can understand what one another means better. So youth understand the pitfalls of social media. They may not recognize some of the risks quite as quickly as adults do, or they may have recognized those risks and decided that they're not all that serious, or that the benefits of using social media outweigh the risks. But they do understand generally the good and the bad about social media. So when we think about how we can help youth safely use social media, what we can't do is tell them to stop using it. This is simply not an effective solution, and there's a lot of research and a growing body of research certainly supporting this. it's not a realistic solution, and it actually might be harmful. Social media, for many young people, is an important way of gaining and maintaining social capital, which is important for building and maintaining friendships and social ties. So, think of the cool places to hang out when you were a kid. Maybe it was the mall, maybe it was the hockey arena, football field, wherever. The movies, wherever it was. Now the cool place to hang out is online, and it's through social media. It's Facebook, it's Twitter, it's Instagram, Snapchat. This is partly a function of technological development, and partly it's just partly a function of the times. If we as adults fear for our children's safety and prefer them to come home right after school rather than be wandering around outside with their friends, then it shouldn't really be all that surprising that digital means of communication have become so popular. And it's just a reality. And it's not all bad, certainly. So telling students to disconnect would be like telling you as a kid that you can't go wherever your friends are, wherever they're hanging out. And that's simply not an effective solution. So as Shanna mentioned at the beginning, we're going to walk through three different topics really through tonight's presentation. So we're going to start by talking about some of the mixed messages that young people receive online and on social media. Then we'll touch on bullying and violence, and lastly we'll touch on friendships and identity.
All right, so I just want you to take a look at this picture and raise your hand if what you see is an image of a duck. Or use the check mark, whatever's easier. Great. Okay, now let's have everyone raise their hand if what they see is actually a rabbit. Right, so we're almost split, 5 and 3. Good. Now we'll have everybody just think to themselves, raise your hand or check it off if you saw both. So great, lots of us saw both as well. Well, the point of this little exercise is just to see that everything is not always what it seems, and that's the issue with mixed messages. Some of us see a bunny rabbit, some of us see a duck, and some of us see both, and we can see it both ways. This has never been more true than it is for students' view of media. And when we as adults are watching a television show and we would never think it was real life, that doesn't mean that the messages that youth are learning from the show aren't things they might want to try out or do or think is cool or appropriate. So this exercise kind of shows us that there's always more to every situation than we think. So we have to help youth look beyond the content to the media behind the messages presented. And then so we'll just kind of look through today some of the mixed messages that they're receiving, and then some positive things that we can hopefully use to spark their interest. So where are these messages? They're everywhere: sports, gaming, marketing, social media, TV, reality TV, YouTube, music, pretty much everywhere. So when we look at these, daily youth are receiving messages in all these mediums, whether consciously, subconsciously. They're receiving messages about violence, relationship, drugs, alcohol, glamorous lifestyles, lifestyles of reality stars, celebrities, things about generalization, stereotypes, expectations, and more. Not every student is going to, want to know more about a celebrity's life or think that that's the way they want to live. And not every student's going to watch something that's violent and going to want to be violent themselves. That's not what we're saying. But the messages, they are mixed. You see your sports hero doing one thing, and then the next day you find out that they're doing something negative as well. So what kinds of messages are we teaching youth? And how do we help them understand that, they could be a great sports player, but they do make bad decisions as well? in a time of, you know, their hormones are changing in their lives, they're developing their sense of identity and seeking independence, that they're getting all these messages. So we can't really blindfold them and hope that they don't notice anything in these years. What we really have to do is help them to identify and decode and critically evaluate the messages and realize their own value and celebrate their individual uniqueness as well. So, you know, mixed messages, they're not new. These are some pretty old advertisements. It's not a new concept. We've seen, experienced mixed messages all our lives, and we all turned out just fine. I can think of terrible song lyrics that were on the radio at the time. I can think of lots of awful advertisements. When you look at any one of these 4 advertisements here, these are from, you know, the 50s and 60s. So none of this is brand new. And a lot of people turned out just fine with these advertisements. I think the biggest difference is that youth, it's the amount and capacity of these messages that youth receive. It's the way they receive them. If it was in a magazine sitting on the kitchen table at my house, somebody would point that out and talk about it with me. If nowadays, youth, as we were talking, could be on their cell phone looking at something. They could be watching something on YouTube. There may not be an adult watching them and helping them to present different messages or different ideas and decode and deconstruct. So with the technological advancements, speed, frequency, things like posters, billboards, Photoshop have made these messages so much more accessible and available to youth, and they're bombarded by them. So if we want to look at the me in media, this is kind of just a little graphic that we can look at to kind of better understand how media impacts youth so significantly. And by understanding this, we can help youth decode the messages they receive and identify what matters and what doesn't. Because the reality is, youth have constant access to media, and we aren't always around to stop and say, hey, that's not right, or what kind of message is that presenting to you? So when we look at it, it just establishes how the media is in media, or sorry, the me in media. It's really which came first, the chicken or the egg. So that's why there's, you know, we have that whole cyclical kind of nature of it. So if we look at the red box, we look at media is constructed and consumed. Thoughts and decisions go into everything that is accessible, shareable, and downloadable. And then we move on to the green box. Expectations are placed on people, particularly youth, from what they see and hear in the media. And these expectations are placed on them based on what is popular, what investors think will make money, what stores and people think will be, you know, for new consumption, things like that. Moving to the purple box. These expectations, they make youth act and behave a certain way to be liked or to fit in, or make them behave the opposite way so that they, you know, flow away from the crowd. Ultimately, these expectations, stereotypes in media kind of dictate what you think is important or cool. Then when you look at the blue box, youth then construct their identity accordingly, primarily on social media and in real life as well. But you know, finally, when we look at the orange box, what becomes popular or normal with teens becomes the foundation for new media, and people see what will make money, swapping out popular themes, topics, ideas, and the cycle continues. So, you know, when looking at this, it's easy to see why we need to make sure that youth are decoding and deconstructing the media that they're consuming, and understanding that somebody is creating this for them. Somebody is, you know, deciding what is cool, what's popular, and making it that way, making it accessible. You know, what youth are sometimes seeing is a version of reality, maybe not actually reality, but oftentimes we see that youth do try and model themselves after what they see in the media, so it's our job to educate them and make them critical. So I'm going to go quickly through just some examples of mixed messages. In terms of shaping gender norms, ideas about sex, body satisfaction, all those things. So by age 18, the average youth witnesses 200,000 violent acts, 70,000 murders on television. Nearly 2 out of 3 television programs around, you know, the regular prime time frame contain violence. You know, in staggering numbers of shows youth are watching by themselves, especially now that youth can be watching online on YouTube. You can there's tons of online programs that aren't even on TV anymore, so you never know when anyone's watching TV or what they're watching, DVD versions, things like that. just offers a wide range of messages for youth, from stereotyping to bullying to manipulating to seducing and more. Especially reality shows, they're very popular. They glamorize these behaviors because the success of the show directly relates to the amount of bullying, gossip, and conflict. And those people become instant celebrities overnight when they're on a reality show, which is very, appealing to some youth. What they don't often consider is that reality television is scripted. They're called cast members on those shows. There are multiple takes for scenes to ensure they get the best outcomes and camera angles. Producers cast the right people in the show so that they definitely bring out fighting, conflict, frustration, all those things. But again, youth often see those reality celebrities as being stars. The Gypsy Sisters used to be on a show called My Big Fat Gypsy Wedding, and because they caused so much drama and violence and everybody wanted to see more of them, they got their own television show. What we hope is that youth start to watch more positive shows that are both reality but also scripted. One idea to do is have youth find really important TV shows where they're learning something. So whether that's a show about, cooking, or a do-it-yourself or a home improvement show, those can be very interesting as well to watch. I find shows like Anthony Bourdain, Parts Unknown, on CNN, it's all about food, but it really focuses on deconstructing the myths and ideas about places all over the world. Last season there was an episode set in Detroit where he explored the past, present, and future of the Motor City, and he looked at the lives of the citizens, back from the glory days, to see kind of the current state of where the city is. And it was pretty incredible to watch the citizens that stayed who are rebuilding their communities, but he does it all in a way of talking about food. And it's really, really interesting and fascinating. There's shows like The Taste and The Voice, kind of less about who's behind the work itself or the food, and more about, what someone sounds like when they sing or what somebody's food tastes like. And it's kind of cool to watch the people who make it on those shows move ahead and be mentored and pushed to learn and achieve more and more. They're very positive, powerful, and inspiring types of shows. It would be neat to have youth do some presentations on those types of shows and share why those messages are important. When you look at lyrics, I teach dance in the evenings some nights, so finding appropriate songs to play for youth ages 5 to 18 is often difficult, but they're often about sex and drugs and violence, and it's really not easy to find appropriate content. There's a recent song now that everyone loves to listen to called Earned It. It's from the movie 50 Shades of Grey. It's very catchy, but it's all about earning sex. And the songs that come up, when I see children singing it, it makes you feel kind of obviously pretty uncomfortable. They're not really, but I know they're not really listening to the lyrics necessarily, but some research does show that when the youth sees, or when people see a video and then listen to the song over and over again, your brain is subconsciously processing that video. So who knows, if you're watching a video where you have some violence in it, some sexual content, some objectification of women, and then you listen to the song 40 more times, is that message being repeated over and over again? Years ago, or a couple of years ago, I guess, the song Pumped Up Kicks was super catchy. I remember seeing 6- and 7-year-olds singing it, and literally the line was, "All the other kids with the pumped up kicks better outrun my gun." And there's just children singing it because they're not really listening to the lyrics, but again, it's just, that's what sells. These types of songs sell. And you know what, thankfully there's been a change in music lately. When I looked at the top 10 iTunes downloads, the majority of songs are fairly appropriate. Messages about genuine, long-lasting love relationships, or songs that challenge relationship stereotypes and norms, supporting all different types of relationships, things like that. So it's really nice to see that maybe there is going to be a little bit of a shift where we see some more positive and influential messages in our music. Another thing that's really big is the hypersexualization of youth. So when we consider that you'd see 250,000 commercials aimed at their appearance by age 17, it's hard to not understand why they act and want to look a certain way. Advertisements are everywhere. There's so many ads on any of the social media sites, but also on YouTube. You have to kind of sit there and watch through those advertisements. How can you argue with them trying to become something, but then those are the advertisements that they see? most messages and advertisements are not necessarily about selling the product. We all know they're more about selling the feelings that you'd have when you buy the product, or the life that you'd have, or the look that you might have. So whether it's an advertisement for a movie, a product, a song. The adrenaline action figures down on the bottom middle of the screen, those are for wrestling. And even just looking at that, there's your gender stereotypes. You buy a macho-looking muscular guy or a skinny fit girl who's barely wearing anything. You can also look at the Dove commercial. Dove has great campaigns for real beauty, and it's all about looking at changing our definition of beauty to be more natural and who we really are. And a spokesperson at Dove said that they believe that to make a real difference, we must take action and contribute in ways that will help women and girls celebrate their individual beauty. It's funny, though, that Unilever owns Dove and Axe body spray, and when you think about the Axe advertisements, it's exactly total opposite in terms of how sexualized all the commercials are and the messages that women receive in those same commercials, and men receive in those same commercials. Thankfully, some celebrities are standing up for this. When you see down the bottom right-hand corner, that's Lorde. This is from last year. She tweeted out a picture of herself before and after being photoshopped, stating that she finds this curious that 2 photos from today, one edited so my skin is perfect and one real. And then she said, remember, flaws are okay. So there are, lots of celebrities challenging those stereotypes and myths out there and really trying to work hard to kind of have youth have positive messages. But you can totally see in just these couple examples how youth have so many different mixed messages bombarding them every day. A great website, if you've never been on it before, and I hope most people have, is one called Common Sense Media. And this is great for source of information for parents, for educators, for youth. There's a section to go on and you can search video games, movies, songs, YouTube clips, anything like that, and find reviews from parents by parents or adults by adults. And the reviews are all scored based on a traffic light analogy, so you can see what age is appropriate by the age it's in green, yellow if it's, you should be cautious about whether that particular item is appropriate for that age, or red if it's not appropriate for that age. There's also many forums where parents and educators can ask questions on topics about sex, gender, and body image, for example. Some of the questions in that particular category include, what is body image? How do boys and girls have different concerns? What can media affect, or how can media affect body image? And it's really neat because there's an option to explore questions by age. So you can go, different age brackets to see what maybe teenagers are asking or preschoolers are asking. You can also just look at the most popular questions, the ones that are searched the most frequently. And there's often links to articles and videos to support conversations that you might have with youth and read research on the topics. And they recently, on this particular topic, published a research paper entitled Children and Teens, Media and Body Image. And it was published in 2015, and it highlights the latest pressures youth are facing and tips for adults for talking to kids about this. And what I also found neat was they developed this infographic. This is for parents, but it's about how to have the conversation with youth and what the different images are. So you can kind of see they pull it all into one nice package. 87% of female TV characters aged 10 to 17 are below average in weight. Boys have body images too. And then teens feel pressure to look good and cool online. So it's just a really neat caption, but they have so much information on their website, and I strongly recommend anybody go look at it. There's tons of lesson plans, and we'll give you a link to that later on in the presentation as well. And now I think it's up. Oh, no, this is still me. Sorry, there's a lot in a row for me. Some great resources are these, we have these Educate and Evaluate resources, so we have Common Sense Media on there, but there's also some really cool websites here. A Thin Line is by MTV, and it's a website where youth can go and kind of answer kind of quiz questions and evaluate their digital line. So are they crossing that digital line? Do they need to kind of scale back their media use? It might be something to do with how many times they text someone in a day, or the type of content they're texting about, things like that. And it gives great tips for how to maybe be more appropriate when you're using media, especially when you're interacting with one another. Mobile Safety is a good site for parents. The goal of the site is to educate parents about potential risks for youth about using cell phones and look at some strategies to help keep youth safe. TextEd.ca has some cool information about texting and just like texting lingo. Media Smarts, some people have heard of it, it's Canada's Centre for Digital and Media Literacy. It's got great great lesson plans on there. And last but not least, that'snotcool.com is just a really fun site for kids. You can go there and you talk about where you draw your digital line, and you have like these call-out cards where you can send them to people if they're doing things that are making you uncomfortable online. And last but not least, looking at technology in the classroom. So some of the tips we have for educators in terms of what to do in the classroom is to balance the tech time and non-tech time. Great way is to have the kids involve themselves in showing information about technology and how they would use it, how you could use it positively. Students will not always make effective choices when it comes to choosing tech sources over non-tech sources, but definitely encouraging them to share those examples. Teaching of research skills using technology and non-tech sources is very important. When you give youth a chance to use the internet for research, they're often overwhelmed, and it's hard to kind of like look through for what's appropriate, what's not. So knowing the right tools to share and researching them ahead of time and helping youth kind of figure that out and seeing the value of a Wikipedia page for what it is versus an actual research article for what that is. And simple strategies. If you have 5 minutes at the end of your class, you could go to YouTube and look at a discussion about advertisements on the website, or you could go and find a good TED Talk to share with everybody. But looking and showing youth that you find positive things online really does inspire them to also find positive things. Teaching them to flood the feed with positive messages. If they're constantly seeing negative media messages, inappropriate media messages, or inappropriate things on their feeds, then encouraging them to start finding positive messages, research articles, TED Talks, anything like that they can post up and share positive things that are going on and just flood the feed that way. And I think that is, now it's up for Ryan.
Thank you. So bullying and cyberbullying specifically, of course, is one of the most widely discussed risks that young people face online. So we wanted to touch on this briefly because there is a lot of information, also a lot of misinformation out there presented, especially in the media, on cyberbullying and the risks of cyberbullying and some of the effects of it. So we wanted to touch on this and again, like with the mixed messages, hopefully give you some strategies that might help you deal with students who may be cyberbullied in your own classes. So first up, just some brief facts about cyberbullying. It is reasonably common. At least 1 in 5 students is the victim of cyberbullying, but this could be as high as 4 out of 5. Most research now would say that it's in the 1 in 5 students range. But most students say that they either know somebody who has been cyberbullied or that they have witnessed it themselves. I do want to point out in mentioning these rates that cyberbullying, while very common, it is less common than traditional forms of bullying. So physical bullying, verbal bullying, social bullying, that type of thing. Cyberbullying does not happen as often as those other types of bullying, even still. But of course, any students being bullied or cyberbullied, 1 is too many. Girls are more likely to be cyberbullied than boys, and this fits with the types of bullying that girls tend to do, more of that social and relational type of bullying, whereas boys tend to be involved in more of the physical bullying. LGBT students, so lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgendered students, are much, much more likely to be bullied and cyberbullied than other youth. Yes, Audrey, I can point you to some research if you are interested. There is actually quite a bit of research that shows that cyberbullying is less common than other types of bullying. As for how you're able to differentiate between the two, it's typically survey research, so you're right in pointing out that quite often something does start at school and go online, but it would just be asking the students how they've been bullied or different situations they found themselves in. Have you been teased online? Have you been sent a mean message on Facebook, things like that. So it's typically self-report. So it is certainly, it's not perfect research by any means, but that's typically how these things are determined right now. Cyberbullying research, keep in mind as well, is it's still in its infancy. It is a newer area of research, so some of these methodological things are still being worked out a little bit, and hopefully in the next few years it gets a little bit better. That's one of my goals anyways, is to help that process along. And an important point here at the bottom is that fewer than half of all victims tell an adult. So that's an issue. We know that when adults are told, and they typically intervene when they're told about bullying and cyberbullying, they have a pretty quick impact and a pretty positive effect. So it is troubling that fewer than half of all victims tell an adult. One of the things that a lot of young people might forget now, and adults certainly too, is that there are real offline consequences to our online behaviors. We tend to forget that there's a person behind the computer screen, on the other side of that screen, when we send those messages on Facebook or those texts or those emails or whatnot. Fewer than 30% of young people report being not bothered by cyberbullying. So it's, people are bothered by cyberbullying, certainly. Most young people who are cyberbullied feel angry, frustrated, or sad. They are 3 times more likely to be anxious or depressed. They are 2 times more likely to have actually attempted suicide. And they are at a much higher risk for school problems, so things like fighting at school, cheating, skipping school, being suspended, having poor grades, a much higher risk of substance use as well. And young people who are cyberbullied are often involved in traditional bullying, as Audrey pointed out in the chat section a moment ago. I see that you've posted some other comments there as well. I'm just going to keep going, and we can certainly discuss those more in the question and answer section at the end as well. Another thing we wanted to touch on, again, because it often comes up in the media, is the issue of sexting. So if you haven't heard this term before, it's typically used to describe one person sending a nude or semi-nude picture of him or herself to another individual. When it becomes particularly problematic is, of course, when it's forwarded on to people other than the intended recipient. And again, it's somewhat common. It's reasonably common. It's more common than certainly most people would like to think it is. 28% of teens have admitted to sending a naked picture of themselves. 15% of teens have received these types of messages, and 33%, so 1/3 of teenagers know somebody who has been involved in sexting. There are a number of reasons why this happens. Certainly it can be pressure in a form of domestic or intimate partner violence. Sometimes it's a form of quote-unquote safe sex as well, where often a teen girl will send a picture of herself to her boyfriend or girlfriend because she's being pressured to do so, and she feels that, or she's being pressured into having sex, and she's not ready yet, so this seems like a safer approach. And of course, it's not. Once those pictures are out there, they're out there, and they're very difficult to get back. You know, when I was a kid, I don't remember anybody doing this, but if they did, you know, somebody's parents could have found the picture and torn it up. Now, once something's online or once something is texted, it's so easy to save and forward and pass on to other people, and that, of course, relates to things going viral. And the consequences can be quite severe. You know, technically, it can be classified as child pornography, and we've seen cases in the U.S. where consensual sexting even has been prosecuted as child pornography, and people have been put on sex offender lists, which is obviously a very severe consequence. But again, just the issues of these pictures being out there and being circulated widely beyond the intended recipient is a pretty serious consequence in and of itself. So when we think about how to deal with these things, ultimately, adults are essential for change. We can, as adults, inadvertently promote victimization and harassment, or we can actively discourage it in everyday situations. We all do this, and we use teachable moments to identify harassing or inappropriate behavior when we see it, and we try to educate along the way throughout most of our days. But our role as teachers, as educators, has changed. Because technology has created a need for change. You know, again, we've mentioned this already, but when we were growing up, there was one phone in the kitchen, and our parents could hear all of our conversations with their friends. And if somebody said something inappropriate or disrespectful, most of our parents probably would have mentioned something to us. We've all heard the "if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything" kind of line. But with technology, we don't always have those same opportunities as adults, because much of what youth do is invisible to us. It's just harder to see. So it's important to make sure that youth know we are there for them. If they're being bullied, they are vulnerable, and they require our support more than ever. It's also important to remember that it's not their fault that they're being bullied or cyberbullied. They probably didn't do anything to bring this on, and they need to know that you will support them through this difficult time. So if your student has told you that they are being bullied, you should be very proud. As we talked about, few young people report bullying to an adult, so it's a really good thing that they're coming to you. At the same time, don't be upset if they told another adult, but they didn't tell you. The key is that they have told somebody they trust. Children shouldn't have to deal with bullying on their own. The power differential in bullying is simply too difficult to overcome for most people without adult intervention. No matter what, it's important to take your students seriously and do whatever you can do to address the problem. Listen to them when they're discussing bullying with you. You don't have to have all the answers, and if you don't have all the answers, that's completely fine. Involve other people, your school administration, school resource officers, parents. Access those other resources. There are many resources online as well that provide adults with suggestions about things that they can do if a student comes to them and tells them they're being cyberbullied, and we're going to provide links to some of those resources throughout the presentation. So what are some of the things that teachers can look for that might suggest the student is being cyberbullied? If a student suddenly stops using their computer or cell phone, that might be an indication. If they appear nervous when emails or text messages come in, if they don't want to be at school more so than usual, if they appear angry, frustrated, or depressed after they use their cell phone or a computer, if they avoid discussions about what they're doing on their cell phone or computer, or if they become abnormally withdrawn. And again, these are changes that we would see. So if you're teaching high school students, of course, they may be withdrawn in general. So these would be things that are out of the ordinary for these students. And signs that somebody may be bullying somebody else online, if they quickly switch screens or close programs when you walk by, if they get unusually upset, if technology privileges are taken away, if they avoid discussions about what they're doing online or on their cell phone, or if they appear to be using multiple accounts, that might be an indicator that they are cyberbullying somebody else. So what are some things that you can do then if somebody tells you they're being cyberbullied? These are a few strategies you can suggest to students. First, you can tell them to stop or leave. Just leave that website, log off the computer for a few minutes. Just regroup, get away from those messages. It might be like telling them not to respond. Most bullies want to get a reaction out of people, so if they don't respond, they're not giving that bully that satisfaction, and the person might move on. Save and print. A number of teachers and principals and vice principals have told me that as hard as cyberbullying can be to deal with, the one good thing about it is there's a paper trail, or there's a digital trail anyways, and it's no longer he said, she said. You can have those printouts right in front of you and deal with it based on what was actually said. Of course, if you learn about it, they've probably already told a trusted adult. If you find out about it in another way, you might suggest that. Encourage them to block the sender. Most social media platforms allow people to block others, and that's a good way of at least temporarily ending the bullying. Encourage people to check their own settings. Make sure their privacy settings are secure, and people who they don't want to see their information can't see it. Suggest that they change their phone number, or email address if it's particularly serious. It's always a good idea to know those privacy policies and terms of use policies that websites have that we quickly click on and click agree to but don't actually read. Facebook, for example, prohibits bullying and harassment, and you can report it directly on Facebook. It's always a good idea to meet with school officials, and if it's really serious, involve the police. Threatening people is illegal, whether it's online or offline. Harassment is illegal, whether it's online or offline. So depending on the age of students, police involvement might be a possible solution. And then the third area that we wanted to touch on were issues that has to do with issues of friendships and identity in cyberspace. So one of the issues is networked publics. So Dana Boyd, an ethnographer and a youth culture and social media expert, argues that what is different as a result of social media is that teens' desire for a social connection and autonomy is now expressed in what she calls networked publics. And these spaces are constructed through networked technology, so social media and cell phones, things like that, and they emerge as a result of the intersection of people and technology. In other words, they are communities that would not exist without technology. These spaces allow people to gather and connect, hang out, and joke around via social media. And so these communities are formed via social media and serve the same functions that publics like malls or parks did for previous generations of teenagers. Teens engage with these publics for the same reasons that they have always engaged with publics. They want to be part of the larger world by connecting with others and having the freedom of mobility. Of course, the ways that teens can interact in these environments is different than in the past. Importantly, online content and expressions have limitless longevity, and they may be highly visible. They can also be shared much easier than conversations and social interactions in the past were. And for teens, these represent an obvious part of life in a networked era. For adults, these new opportunities for youth to engage in public life is often quite disconcerting. But again, we want to stress that it's not all bad. Yet Dana Boyd's fantastic. Check out that link if you're interested in youth and digital culture at all. She's really one of the, well, she's the biggest name probably in this area. So the current generation of young people is often referred to as Generation Me, but it might be the case that Generation Social would be a more appropriate title. More than 80% of 12 to 17-year-olds have at least one social networking profile, and 22% of teens check their social networks at least 10 times per day. Interestingly, 32% of students in grades 4 to 6 have a Facebook account, and even though Facebook's own terms of service require members to be at least 13 years old to have an account, and by grade 11, basically, just about all Canadian teens have a Facebook account. In addition, 63% of teens send at least one text message daily, and only 1% of teens send less than one message per week. The average 12 to 17-year-old teenager will send about 5,000 text messages per month, and perhaps not surprisingly, older teenage girls, those between the ages of 14 and 17, are the most prolific texters. Contrary to common belief, though, young people are not talking to strangers online. Instead, almost all of the time that young people spend talking to others online is spent talking to their real-world friends. And this goes back to that idea of networked publics. For many young people, hanging out with friends and developing a sense of identity online is commonplace. Everything posted, linked, liked, uploaded, tweeted, pinned, etc. It's typically being fairly carefully constructed. And yeah, and we need to remember that these things that other people post, it's a construction as well. So when we see other people going to parties and having a lot of fun and doing all these cool things all the time, people are building that identity online. And it doesn't necessarily mean that if you're not doing that, that you're any less cool or whatever than other people. It's simply a matter of often social construction. So with that, I think I'm going to pass it back over to Shannon.
Great, so Ryan's brought me right back into basically the whole concept of identity and microfame. So as he was saying, that everything that youth are posting and tweeting, everything that everybody is posting and putting up online is chosen. Like, we choose to put that online to kind of either inform or create or support the identity that we have and what we want others to perceive us to be. How often do we untag ourselves in a picture because it's not flattering, or because we don't want to be seen that we were in that location, or maybe we ask for a tag in that picture because we're excited that we were in that spot or we were with those people. So research shows that youth are becoming increasingly dependent on the feedback they receive from their peers over social networking. And it also shows that while youth love posting about themselves, they have unfriended others who post too many selfies or self-updates. So with all this identity creation online, the viewers or the consumers forget that what they're seeing on somebody else's Facebook page, for example, is a construction as well. It's a choice. And it's hard because when you see someone else posting pictures that show happiness, fun, excitement, you want to have those same experiences and those same feelings, and you think there's something wrong. Youth can think there's something wrong in their life when they aren't experiencing those same situations, not realizing that that poster is posting those things because that's what they want you to see in their life. They're not posting maybe the fight that they had with mom or dad about their homework, or the fight they had with their friend yesterday. Those are the things they're leaving out. So it's easy to forget. You only really post things that you want people to see, and rarely ever do we post things that they don't. Research also talks about how there is a divide now happening when youth who are having a good time in life, or things are going well for them in life, tend to post more positive things, and those are easier for others to quote like on Facebook and to say that they like it, or to post a comment about. And sometimes youth that are struggling and having a more difficult time, they tend to post some more negative things, which are they're hard to like. You're not going to like something that's negative because you feel bad for that person, so you might comment on it, but often people don't know what to say. But it just feeds into that whole idea that you're not getting the likes or the comments or the connection that you want to get online. So there is sort of that divide that's happening as well, and it just really kind of further hurts those that are already kind of hurting, or feeling that they're not included, or feeling like their life isn't as much fun when they're posting, because they're not getting the same kind of reaction. And it's also this whole concept of microfame. With identity comes microfame. It kind of hinges on the, quote, viralness, about a post or a video or anything like that, a link that you put up. It isn't just about what's produced and presented online, but it's the audience's reaction and ongoing response. So, often people will post a picture or video and they want to see how many likes or comments, or how many retweets or posts, or reposts, reshares, how many people search it up, all those things. That's what you want. You want to see how many. I had a group of students at Oak Ridge Secondary School in London, Ontario. They're working on their dance show, and they posted a preview video, and they checked that feed constantly to see it. They're like, oh, we're at 100 views, we're at 120 views, we're at 300 views. The next day, we're at 500 views. And that was what they were all talking about, how many views they had and how many people had watched it. And then one of the girls laughed and said, you know, it's probably my mom watching it like 4,500 times herself. And, you know, they all got a good chuckle out of it. But it was all about, you know, how much attention they got from that video. So it's just this whole idea of this microfame, you know, which basically relates to when the subject and the quote fans, so people who are participating by watching that video, kind of directly create a celebrity in some way. They you know, like that body of work, and they leave comments, they publish reactions, they send emails about it or link it, and it kind of builds up that person or that group's reputation. And it, you know, that's what I think a lot of youth particularly are kind of striving for. They want to be the one that had the video that went up and had X number of votes or X number of likes or X number of comments. So it is something that it's cool. It's really neat that they can do this, but it's also reminding them that, you know, identity and microfame are things that they can be fleeting, they can come and go, especially when it's online, and it's important to really try and hone in on that personal feeling about how you feel about yourself, and not so much maybe about the attention you get when you are doing these things online. So that brings us to looking at just assessing appropriateness. Again, encouraging youth to kind of become active users rather than passive participants, but at the same time really thinking, you know, what's appropriate? Do I really need to have 500 likes on a picture of myself before I went out on a Friday night? Or is it enough, you know, that I feel good about myself? So when we look at these things, like what are some positive, appropriate YouTube clips we can watch? What are some positive and appropriate internet sites we can go and visit? And then just, you know, social networking sites, and what kinds of things can we do to think about our global and social images that we want to portray. Also, just the importance of netiquette. With the identity and microfame obviously comes some people who are posting very inappropriate and negative messages on other people's pictures or videos, things like that. So encouraging youth to practice netiquette. They're treating others as they want to be treated, respecting others' opinions. That's a skill that I find with the youth that I work with. I also work at the Thames Valley District School Board, so, you know, in the classrooms that I work in, and even with the students that I teach in the evenings, it's a skill to teach them how to respect each other's opinions, especially when we don't necessarily agree on, you know, what that opinion is. Being genuine, not harassing somebody. You know, if you're in somewhere where you don't feel comfortable, leave the area. Or if people are posting things, you can block the post, you can block the feed, you can, you know, kind of remove yourself. You don't have to kind of engage in that. And then just overall behaving ethically. And Ryan, you're up.
So similarly, these are some possible suggestions for students to help them use social networking sites more safely. Whenever possible, encourage them to avoid using their real names. So many teens do this with email addresses, but Facebook asks you for your real name, so people tend to put it in, but of course you don't have to actually do that. Facebook really tries to get you to use your real name, but there are ways around it: first name, middle name, things like that. Post as little personal information as possible. You know, your friends know most things about you, so you don't need to fill out, again, all those profile sections on Facebook just because they ask the questions. Facebook wants that information. It's great for their advertising purposes, but it's really not necessary for most people to actually have all of those sections filled out online. In profiles, it's often a good idea for young people not to post their cell phone numbers or their email addresses if they are being bullied. Particularly, it just gives people another avenue to contact them through. Using secure profiles is a good thing, so setting strong privacy settings, or setting privacy settings correctly, I should say, so that only the people you want to see information can see it. Whenever possible, it's usually a good idea to not post pictures or videos. That can be hard, obviously, and some of these sites like Instagram entirely function on posting pictures. When pictures are posted, it's usually advisable to try to keep personal information out of them. So try not to show pictures with, your soccer team's jersey or school t-shirt or something like that. Again, if somebody is doing something bad and trying to follow you around, that stuff just makes it easier for them to do so. Online friends should always be offline friends. That's for people of all ages. If you don't know them, there's no reason for them to be your friend. Most 10-year-olds on Facebook don't know 500 people, so they probably shouldn't have 500 friends, but it becomes a status symbol. And it's always a good idea to monitor your friends' profiles to see what they're posting about you. So again, we want to reiterate that the sky is not falling. To be sure, some people make poor choices when they're using technology, but many youth have had profoundly positive experiences with technology. Almost 40% of Canadian teens have used social networking tools to share a story or a piece of artwork they've created themselves, and the internet can be a powerful means of encouraging social engagement. Half of students in all grades have gone online to find information about news and current events, and half of students in grades 7 to 11 have sent links to news stories to others. 75% of teens have used the internet to find information about news, health issues, and relationships, and 35% of teens have joined or supported an activist group online, such as Students Against Bullying or Free the Children. Many young people recognize the values of disconnecting from technology as well. For instance, 94% of all students have chosen to unplug in order to do things like spend more time with friends and family and enjoy quiet time by themselves or go outside. So we tend to focus on the negative things with technology, but we really do want you to keep in mind that technology is not all bad. There are a lot of really, really good things to technology. Unfortunately, some people make inappropriate decisions, but hopefully we've been able to give you some strategies to help you guide them to making better decisions.
And so just to conclude here, we want to talk a little bit about us as teachers. We're professionals, we're mentors, and we're educators. And we are teaching the digital generation, and we can't change that. So I know some educators want to avoid and restrict access to technology or social media, but it's not really an effective strategy if you want to engage youth. And we can also learn a lot from youth in terms of technology. We can definitely model appropriate use of technology and behaviors, and they can teach us so much about how to use, the digital means that they are so comfortable with. So if we can embrace their knowledge and impart our wisdom, then we have a pretty great team going on, so that when they're growing up, they're educated and they're critically literate about digital safety. And we can be the ones to help them determine what's safe, and they'll only ask for help if they believe we're going to listen to them and support them and not tell them that their technology is bad. I ask every single day to learn more about their technology because I feel like that's the only way I can keep kind of up with, in some way, I'm never going to be as good as they are, but just keep up with the things that they know and the things that they do. But what they don't always realize is something as simple as digital footprints and how often their legacy is created online, but it's also left online. If I took a picture that was inappropriate when I was young, it was developed at probably Black's Photography and then ripped up later on. For them that it's not as easy, so I can educate them on that. And when it comes to the digital footprint, they want to, what does it look like when they use Google to search up their name? What do they see? What are the first things that come up? And if it's positive, great. If it's not, then what steps can they take to change that? The number one thing, flood the feed with positive things, find ways to put positive messages up online so that when the first few things that you look at, it's a positive thing. For us as teachers, the same thing. Would we rather have, my teacher reputation come up first, or would you rather have a whole bunch of cool things about your classroom and the educational blog that you're writing, and other links to things that you're working on and lesson plans that you're producing? Obviously, we want that type of stuff to come up first. So encouraging them with those kinds of strategies and watching their digital footprint, that is something that we know more about than they do. So kind of going and becoming partners in this. Ryan and I would love it if people would, I'm going to give you some more ideas that people have come up with and shared, but if you would type into the chat how you use media or technology in your class with youth, or what ways you engage youth with media and technology. I brainstormed with a few of my colleagues and just some ways that they're using technology in their classrooms and ways that I use technology. And I also asked a lot of my students ways that their teachers in other classrooms are using technology. So here's just some examples. Obviously, class websites, lots of people have class websites now, which is great. Someone was talking about it in an art class. They shared their work using a hashtag. So they came up with a hashtag about whatever it was that they were talking about, and people would take pictures and then post that using the hashtag, and then they could search it up that way. Or using a hashtag after a great discussion. One student said that their teacher brought in a guest speaker, and then they had a hashtag afterwards, and they would ask questions or post more comments that they thought about later on in the evening, and then they all discussed it the next day at school. One of my students said that their teacher encourages blogging or online journaling related to the coursework. So when you leave after class, they encourage them to go home and think more about those topics and write a post and share it with everybody. Encouraging media and projects in general. I have youth that make fantastic videos using Animoto or presentations on Prezi, and I'm just starting to kind of really wrap my head around both of those, but when I watch what youth are able to come up with, it's pretty incredible. Even hosting podcasts on YouTube, setting up a student told me that their teacher set up a Twitter account for a special interest project, and they all kind of use that in terms of talking about different things that were going on and what they're excited about with that particular project, and again, hashtagging whatever kind of topics are coming up to kind of keep it all collated. And then last but not least, one student said that they collaborate online with other classrooms that are doing similar topics, and they find ways to share their resources online with each other. And I thought that was really cool as well. So those are just some examples that people brainstormed with me. And looks like lots of great things are coming into that side panel too. Students really like using Facebook. That's cool. And then using Google Hangouts. That's awesome. And global connections between classrooms. That's fantastic. All right. And so here's some examples of some lesson and unit plans. Some are online, some are free, some are for purchase. So on the Canadian Women's Foundation, on their website, they have, we developed actually a set of lesson plans for them about representation of youth in media, and it's for youth, kind of designed for teachers in grade 9 through 12, and it matches some of the curriculum expectations. So it's kind of like a mini unit. It's about 3 lessons long. Years ago, probably about maybe over the span of 3 years, a group of educators in the Thames Valley District School Board, and there was some from Toronto District School Board that got together based on the Ministry of Education grant, and we developed lesson plans about the impact of media violence on children and adolescents, and the plans are developed for youth JK to grade 12. So those are all available on our website. And then there's some cyberbullying lesson plans that are free to download that we developed for the RCMP, and those are for age brackets like junior, intermediate, and then for secondary school students. As I said before, Common Sense Media has tons of lesson plans and unit plans, and that's the link to get to the educator section and the scope and sequence if you're looking for particular topics. Cyberbullying Research Center has tons of great resources for educators, and the 4th Hour the 4th Hour program is founded at the KMH Center for Prevention Science where I work, and I'm one of the writers in the program, and Ryan was working with us for many years as well. There's lots of programming for grades 7 through 12 addressing healthy relationships and some of the topics that we mentioned today as well. And then if we look at the next slide, it's just some suggested resources. We kind of already touched on some of these already, but just to kind of bring it all back together. Mediasmarts.ca, great information on digital literacy and cyberbullying and security. Need Help Now is a good site for dealing with sexting and exploitation. PrevNet has tons of great research studies and statistics and resources for teachers, parents, and youth. And then the youthrelationships.org website, we have a 4th R community of practice where educators can log on and share resources and things like that as well. So that brings us to the end. If there's any questions, we're happy to answer them at this time.
I'm so sorry that I dumped so many links into the chat towards the end there, but that is a huge wealth of resources that Ryan and Shanna have shared and collected from various websites, and I'll make sure that all those links are also on the resource page that I'm still working on. There's a lot of links to post there, but I am going to drop that link into the chat as well, and but you will be emailed it also, so not to worry about that, but there it is there if you want to open it and start peeking around. I'll make sure all the lesson plan resources are on there, and they're not on there yet, but they will be. So thank you all for participating tonight. And Adrienne, I can see you're typing possibly a question, so no rush. We've got a few minutes here. I'm going to put up their contact information as well, since they so nicely shared it. So thank you very much, Shanna and Ryan. There we go. And the resource page that we've got put together does have links to the previous sessions that Shanna and or Ryan have done through OTF Connects that you may find useful as well. And we do hope that you take the time to go through some of those really rich resources and have some of those conversations with your students. I know that social media in the classroom is becoming a lot more commonplace as a learning tool as well, and so I know that that's something that you're probably wondering and thinking about as well, and we have quite a few archived OTF Connect sessions that touch on some of those things, and the digital literacy and the digital citizenship skills that are necessary to build in to make sure that you are effectively and safely using those with your students, and also just helping them learn about how to use it safely themselves, and using a lot of the resources that Ryan and Shanna shared tonight. So thank you everyone for your participation. And there's our feedback survey link right there, the big Google one in the center of the page. You can just click right on that, and that'll open it up in your own browser. And we sure are appreciative of any and all feedback that we receive from our teachers. What you tell us definitely shapes what we offer in future, and so please do let us know. And the calendar of events is there in the lower part of the screen as well, and I've got a slide with where is it, of our upcoming sessions. So May is all the sessions there are the remaining sessions that we have in OTF Connects for our 2014-15 year. The May 19th session is the only one that is fully registered, so there's no more room in that session. So if you're interested in it, you can let me know, and we can put you on a waiting list for that, but everything else is available, and we encourage you to go and check out the calendar and sign up for some others and tell your colleagues as well. And Adrienne, I see your question there about a good place to have students blog or journal, and there are quite a few, and I'm going to go and, how old are your students? Because we have a few sessions that relate specifically to blogging. Yes, the May 13th session, absolutely, and that is an elementary, maybe up to grade 9, 10 focus. You've got grade 9 to 11s. Okay, so that is perfect. I'm going to post 2 links for you. One is our past resources. Let's see, past webinars and resources page, and on that page are a lot of sessions, but I'm going to grab you a specific link because unfortunately you missed it, but we do record everything and archive it. We did just have one on, should be under S, let me get the title for you, Student Blogging in Secondary Classes with Jacqueline Calder, and that was just a couple of weeks ago. So here you go. And that link, I should have put the title there, has a ton of stuff in it about blogging in general and using it to engage students, as well as a number of the different platforms and pros and cons of the different ones. And that resource page will connect you up with even more. So thank you very much again for your participation, folks, and thank you, Ryan and Shanna, and we hope to see you again soon, and if I don't see you in May, have a terrific summer. And if you're wondering how to get out of Blackboard Collaborate, you can just click on the closed window up in the upper right corner there, and you will be out. If you're already filling out our feedback form, thank you very much, and I can take care of logging you out for you as well.